How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the moves that the Calgary Stampeders have made so far in the 2023 CFL offseason. The Stamps coming off a relatively successful year where they made the playoffs yet again. I think it was like the 16th straight year or something crazy like that. Everybody just keeps counting them out the last couple of years, but they just find a way to still have a very, very talented team. And let's see if they can do it again after a very interesting offseason. So first, let's take a look at their re-signings. And you'll notice right away, if you've watched other videos in this series so far, there's just not a lot of names on this side of the board. So we're going to go more in depth here and talk about a few more re-signings than I would for other teams, just because to give us something more to talk about in this video. So starting with the re-signings, offensive lineman Derek Dennis, the left tackle for this team, they bring back, had an outstanding season last year before he went down to injury, about 3/4 the way through the season. In my opinion, was in line to win most outstanding offensive lineman in the league last year, just playing at such a high level, and very excited to see him back with the Stampeders. It looked in doubt for a little bit, but the Stampeders able to get a deal done with Dennis. They also bring back wide receiver Reggie Bagleton. Now, Bagleton, in my opinion, going into last year, was the #1 receiver in the CFL. I thought from a skill set standpoint, just the production that he had the previous couple of seasons, but at the end of the day, just was kind of underwhelming last year. I think a lot of that was how he was deployed in Calgary's offense. A lot of short passes, which he can do, but that's not really what his biggest strength is as a player. I like when he can get downfield, get vertical. You saw that a little bit in flashes last year, but just not too much on a regular basis. I think he's a good candidate for a bounce back season, though. If they look at the film and just make some tweaks, maybe get someone else to bring in that role, or deploy someone else in that short to intermediate role, and let Bagleton really attack downfield next season. Excited to see what he has in store for 2023. They bring back linebacker Cameron Judge, just a crucial part of this team's ratio situation. What a trade last offseason, bringing him in for Royce Mechie, the safety. Just a really good trade for both teams, in my opinion. And Judge was arguably this team's best defensive player at times last season, and it was vital for the team to retain him. A guy that can play well in pass coverage, can be a tackling machine in run defense, and just really excited to see what he has in year 2 in Calgary. Now, the last two guys I want to talk about here are two defensive backs that they bring back. Brad Muhammad, a halfback that really impressed me last season. He was a guy that was kind of on and off of rosters. I believe he was with Ottawa and other teams as well the last couple of CFL seasons. But last year in Calgary, he really hit his stride and was one of the better defensive backs, or one of the more noticeable defensive backs in the league last season, making a lot of plays from that halfback spot. So I thought that was a really good move to re-sign him for Calgary. And they also bring back cornerback Jonathan Moxey, who I thought brought a little bit of physicality to that defensive back room, and length and size, and I thought he had a pretty good season for them last year. So two really good pieces to bring back in that secondary, and I thought they did a pretty good job retaining some of these key pieces that they had going into the free agent market. Now turning our attention over to the whiteboard, starting with their additions, starting with defensive end Julian Hauser that comes over from the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Very versatile player, can drop into coverage even from that defensive end spot. Not really a #1 pass rusher per se, in my opinion, and I think that showed up last year in Hamilton, where they really counted on him to be their #1 defensive end. But at the end of the day, I think he's still a very good player, a good #2 pass rusher, and I think he'd be a good fit in Calgary. And they also bring in linebacker Micah Alway from the BC Lions. I forget where he played last year. I think it was BC. It's hard to keep track. I think he was cut midway through last year. But the year prior to last year with Ottawa, he actually had a really impressive season. I think this is going to be the Jameer Thurman replacement in the middle of Calgary's defense. I think he'll do the role just fine. It's not one of the better linebackers in the league, in my opinion, but still starting caliber one. And then the final guy here is a guy they picked up before free agency started And this is a guy that hasn't played in the CFL since 2018. He was on Calgary's last Grey Cup winning team, and that is defensive end James Vaughters that they bring back from the NFL. He spent the last several years down there. He previously played 2 seasons in the CFL with Calgary in 2017 and 2018. I think he had about 11 or 12 sacks and was a fairly productive player for them. He's going to be asked to play a big role in this defense. I would assume this is their defensive end duo. They also have Isaac and Demi Berglund that they can rotate in there. So excited to see what this new look defensive end rotation does in Calgary next year. I think that could be their addition of the year, Vaughters, if he could really come back to the CFL and apply some of the knowledge that he's gained from playing down south the last couple of years and make him an even better CFL player. Very excited to see what he does in his return to the CFL. But those are just Calgary's additions. Just not many of them, but I think these 3 guys do have a decent opportunity to make an impact for this defense next year. Now, looking at the other side of the board, this is where you're going to have a lot of people questioning this team going into next year because there is a lot of talent that walked out the door here, especially on the defensive side. So let's get to these losses that the Stampeders had this offseason, starting with the big one, quarterback Bo Levi Mitchell. And we all saw this coming. Obviously, Calgary benched Bo Levi midway through last year in favor of Jake Maier. I thought that was the right call. I would have done the same thing. But Bo still was the face of this franchise for many years, was a 2-time MVP or MOP, and 2-time Grey Cup champion with this team. And it's hard to replace those kind of guys in the locker room. So I'm really excited to see how Jake Maier does now with Bo not there to provide some support for him. Because you saw what happened with Dane Evans last year in Hamilton when Mazzoli left the team. Things kind of unraveled when he was asked to be the number 1 guy. So we'll keep an eye on that for Jake Maier going into next year. Bo Levi obviously goes to Hamilton. Then they lose their starting defensive end duos of Sean Lemon and Valerian Oromalade. 2 very productive players last season, and I think these guys will be very missed within this defense. I thought Oromalade was one of the more impactful pass rushers in the league last season, and Lemon was the West Division nominee for most outstanding defensive player, had an amazing season last year. He ends up going to BC. Oromalade goes to Toronto. 2 guys that I think will be sorely missed within this defense. We'll have to see how these new pass rushers that they bring in, Hauser and Vaughters, replace Oromalade and Lemon in this defense. But I think most people would say, and I tend to agree, that that is a downgrade for them. Then they also lose middle linebacker Jameer Thurman, one of my favorite players in the CFL. He goes to Hamilton. I think he provides tremendous versatility. I think he has one of the best skill sets in the league, and I think that even though they do bring in Alway, I think that is, again, a step down for them in terms of talent on this defense. They also lose linebacker Fraser Sopik, developing into a pretty good rotational linebacker for them in blitz packages, also an outstanding special teamer. He also goes to Hamilton, so they lose a little bit of Canadian depth here. They lose defensive back Javian Elliott to the Hamilton Tiger Cats as well. It's kind of a Bo Levi Mitchell effect. A few of these guys end up following him to Hamilton. Elliott has been on and off of this team's roster and into the lineup the last couple of years, but I think that he's a guy that could have his best football in him in the CFL going forward. So it's hard to lose those kind of ascending players. So watch out for Elliott next year in Hamilton, but we'll see if his loss is felt at all for this Calgary defense. They lose wide receiver Sean Bain to the Saskatchewan Roughriders, a guy that's shown a little bit of flashes, had a couple of big games, I think, in 2021. Not as much last year in 2022, but can contribute on special teams. We'll see what happens with him in Saskatchewan if he's given a bigger role there to shine. But I think with Calgary having their receiver core the way it is, with their top 2 guys, with Henry and Bagleton, there just wasn't a ton of room for ascension in this wide receiver core. So I can see why a guy like Bain would go elsewhere. And then they lose defensive end Stephen Banks to the Roughriders as well. Rotational guy, had a big game a couple of years ago, I think with 3 or 4 sacks in a game, but other than that has kind of been little bit invisible for the most part during his time in Calgary. So I don't think that's a massive loss either, unless he really puts it all together in Saskatchewan. And then defensive back Tremaine Washington, they release. But he was a productive player the past couple of years for them. Maybe it was just the one season, but he was a productive player during his time in Calgary. And I think that there's going to be questions again about this defensive backroom in Calgary. It was a very inexperienced defensive backroom this past season. So we'll see how they cope with losses of guys like Washington and Elliott this season. And then the final guy I want to talk about here is wide receiver Richie Sindani, that they lose to the USFL's New Orleans Breakers. Sindani, this was kind of surprising because he's a Canadian player, and the benefits of playing up in the CFL you would think would be higher than playing down in the USFL, but I think that Sindani maybe had reached his ceiling in the CFL, was a guy the Stampeders really liked. They kept him around for a while, but they just never really gave him a massive opportunity within this offense. They gave him a starting role, but just not a huge target share or anything like that. Had his best season, I believe, last year, but still not, a crazy usage rate for him. So he's going to look to, really improve his, game tape and, showcase himself for NFL scouts down in the USFL. But, a lot of talent that walked out the door here for Calgary in free agency. And there's going to be a lot of questions about this roster. Like I said, everybody doubts this team year in, year out in terms of all the guys they lose. They're not usually a big player in free agency. They usually retain a little bit more of their talent than this, but they, they're not usually a team that adds a whole lot from other teams in the league. So we'll have to see what gems they cook up in terms of rookies on this roster or younger players that step into the lineup this next season. And I'm really excited to see Calgary on the field in 2023. But with that said, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. What is Calgary's future outlook looking like for 2023? Let me know in the comments. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.